Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation TV with your host, Jeff Charles. As the Afghanistan saga continues to unfold, the Biden administration has been under criticism for its apparent failure to plan for the rise of the Taliban. But what's noteworthy about this particular issue is that the activist media is not defending the president as they normally do. I have with me Graham Noble, Liberty Nation's chief political correspondent, here to discuss this. Welcome to the program, Graham.
Thanks, Jeff. Nice to be here.
Great. So, Graham, you wrote a piece for Liberty Nation discussing how the media is in, quote, swooning over Biden at the moment. Can you give us an idea of what you mean by that?
Well, Jeff, of course, as you would expect from the establishment media, which is almost entirely left-leaning, they would normally not criticize Joe Biden at all. Nothing he says, nothing he does, he's kind of infallible, like a pope-like figure almost. And of course, Afghanistan fell apart so quickly and so publicly and with such just disastrous consequences that they've even those journalists and reporters who normally would never say a single negative word about Biden, find themselves in a position where they can't just pretend everything is perfectly fine.
Gotcha. And that's kind of probably going to lead to another question that I'm going to ask as well. But you also wrote about how Biden has not exactly been eager to interact with the media. Now, what do you attribute this to? Do you think this is a case of his handlers being afraid of his gaffes or cognitive abilities, or is there something deeper going on?
Yeah, I think mostly you hit the nail on the head there, Jeff. I think mostly this is a question of his aides and advisors, the people around him are just, I believe that they're almost embarrassed to put him in front of the media. He's done a small fraction of the press interviews that both former presidents Barack Obama and Donald Trump had given by this time. I think by this time in their presidencies, Barack Obama had given well over 100 media interviews. I think Donald Trump had given about 50 or something like that, and Joe Biden's given 9. And more particularly, they don't want to put him in front of a press, put him behind the podium there with reporters in front of him asking, questions for which he was not prepared.
Yeah, and I think we saw that really in when he gave his remarks on Afghanistan after not saying anything to the media while the Taliban was resurging, and he gave those remarks, and then what do? He just walked right off the stage. Now, I mean, it's just interesting to see this. I mean, have you seen the media even criticize him for not being as open with the media, with the press, or are they just kind of glossing over that? Or do you think that they know that he's afraid of messing up, so they're not going to be all that hard on him? Because they would have, if Trump had done this, they wouldn't have been as complacent as they're being right now.
No, they wouldn't. From time to time, you will see in the media some remarks that, because of course the press, ultimately, whoever's president, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, the media, they're very self-absorbed. And obviously they're, the business that they're in, that's the most important thing to them, regardless of who's in the White House. And they want access to the president, of course. And so you can bet that they're behind the scenes very frustrated. You don't see too much complaining about that. Although I have seen a report here and there that hints around the fact that, Joe Biden is not particularly accessible to the media.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me wonder how it's going to, continue going forward. I mean, because there's no way he's going to be able to get away with avoiding the media the way he is over the next 4 years. Or, if my theory is right, he'll be stepping down after the midterms. But still, it's not going to wash. But as far as going back to Afghanistan and how the media is covering this is an obvious departure from what they normally do. And you kind of alluded to it earlier, but why do you think that they're not doing their usual shtick, which means to just defend Biden at all costs?
Well, it's interesting because one thing I've noticed in the left, among the left-leaning media organizations, you've actually got two different groups there. You've got one group which is MSNBC is a good example, and there are some other online outlets that are still actually pretty much defending Joe Biden completely. They're basically saying anyone who's criticizing what's going on in Afghanistan, they don't understand the situation. This was inevitable. It was going to happen anyway. This is just collateral damage, basically. Nobody's really to blame, or perhaps Donald Trump's to blame, but nobody else is to blame. That you got that school, and then you got the other school that is saying, well, this really is a mess. I mean, there's no getting around it. And I think the problem is that I believe a lot of people in the establishment media are frustrated because what happened is that in the latter part of 2020, they overpromised. They said that basically Joe Biden was the vaccine, if you like, for the deadly pandemic that was Donald Trump. And Biden's going to come into office and he's going to make everything right. And they overpromised. And then, of course, the Biden administration has under-delivered on the media's promises. And so they're a little frustrated. But one thing you will notice, Jeff, is that they're not really going after Biden personally. They're kind of saying, yes, this is a disaster. This withdrawal from Afghanistan is a mess. It's chaotic. There are Americans being left behind. Oh, how terrible that is. And of course it is always. It's terrible. It's a terrible situation. But you notice that they're not going after Biden personally. If Donald Trump was in the White House right now and this same situation was unfolding in Afghanistan, they would be going after Trump personally. They would be saying he's incompetent, he doesn't care, he's left these poor Americans stranded in the country, he's betrayed our allies, he's just complete. They would, he should resign, he should be impeached, he's incapable of being president. Those are the kind of things, that personal attacks that we're not seeing with the media's coverage of Afghanistan now.
Yeah, you're right. And even as you were talking, I was thinking, and I don't always like to do the if this were Trump thing, but in this case, it's warranted because if this were Trump, there would be wall-to-wall coverage. They would be talking about nothing else. They would be hammering that point home about how horrible Trump is for abandoning our allies. People are going to die. He doesn't care. And he probably doesn't care anyway because they're all brown people and he's racist, blah, 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 blah. Anybody could predict what they would say. Yeah. But it is notable that they are even criticizing Biden to a certain extent. Do you think that this might be the beginning of a new trend where they might report more critically on the Biden administration, or do you think that this is just a one-off, or how do you see this proceeding in the future?
Jeff, well, first of all, I'd like to say that, both you and I are so tired of saying if this were Trump, but unfortunately we can't help it. But no, as to your question, unfortunately, I'd like to think that maybe this is the dawn of a new age of media coverage where they actually go back to speaking truth to power as they claim to do. But you know what? I really don't think it is. I really think that maybe it might take a few weeks, it might take a couple more months, but I would say unless there is the horrible, unthinkable situation where Americans in Afghanistan are rounded up by the Taliban and paraded as hostages, or worse still, some of them are actually executed, then that's a whole different ballgame. But if that does not happen, I believe that within a matter of weeks from now, we are going to see the media narrative change and say, well, it really wasn't. Yeah, okay, it was a hiccup. It was a bump in the road. It was a bit messy, but really, you can't actually blame the president for this. I think that's what's going to happen. Business as usual.
I see. Yeah. That's kind of what I think too. Once it blows over, it's back to business as usual. But at Liberty Nation, we will be sure to report on any and all media malfeasance when it comes to the Biden administration. So thanks for joining me, Graham. I appreciate it.
Sure, Jeff. Thank you.
And remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news and analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Just go to LibertyNation.com on your browser or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Jeff Charles. Thanks for watching. This program is a production of LibertyNation.com, conservative news where truth matters.
Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.